It's nice and quiet here tonight. Do you often feel outnumbered, Melissa? Okay.
But now that you mentioned it.
Yeah, now that you mentioned it, yeah, thanks.
Oh, Linda is here too.
That's true.
What's that?
So it's no different than the previous board.
That's true, yeah.
After Julie had it.
I think we've already had more than two. Let's see there. Carol Caroline, Charlotte Kowacki, and nobody know what. Carol Schaefer.
Was it there too, that he was Ann and Judy on it?
We'll call this work session to order. We'd like to excuse Alderman Arnold and Alderman Moore tonight. They're not able to be with us. And Alderman Blomker has an engagement. What time do you have to leave, at 8?
Around 8.
Around 8. So in order to make sure we are able to have a quorum here, we have to be able to go through as much stuff until Alderman Blomker leaves, because once he leaves, guess what? The meeting's over.
I will gladly sacrifice my report and send it out by email tomorrow.
I think there's a couple issues. Well, if you look at the staff report, some of the things are the things that were requested by the board. Would you prefer that Steve send out just an email report to the board so we can move on?
I would still like to discuss item C.
Here's why I'm so ready to move it. I would, if we only have an hour, I would like to discuss the water tower maintenance and start our discussion on the budget.
Well, why don't we do those first?
Yeah.
That's fine, and if we don't have time.
And then if we get to it, if that would be fine with you guys.
And if it would be, I'll just return it on the future
I don't think we have to officially move it, do we?
No, we don't.
Yeah.
This is a work session, so just to meet any sunshine law requirements, just requires that we have it posted on the agenda, not necessarily if we change it or if we choose to change it, or it's okay, because we still have those items on the agenda. So first of all, we will move to discussion on the water tower maintenance. Okay. As all of you know, we had two of our members that were at our board meeting this last week relative to awarding the contract for the water tower maintenance. And it was requested we postpone for this work session to discuss that. And we'll go ahead and open up for discussion. Steve, do you have anything you want to add?
Actually, Dan is sort of the answer man on this, or he is the answer man on this. The information remains the same as in the packet. Last Tuesday, we had McGuire Iron and the other company.
So utility services
Yeah.
company.
They made the bid. What we were bidding out was a multi-year service contract. Yeah, maintenance contract. And we had one that was spelled out for 10 years from McGuire Iron. We had a 3-year contract, and then each year following, which we can extrapolate out to be a 10-year contract. Can you tell us what 10 years?
So
What bid
let's
did we-
start here. When we open the bids, I read out the name of the company that bid, and then we have a very specific, what we call a bid response form. It's optional, but we like to use that. On McGuire Irons, it says, please see the attached schedule. You flip through to their 10-year schedule. They actually submitted a bid and an alternate bid. One was 460-some thousand, one was 547,000. One was 467,000, one was 542,000.
And the differences on those bids were just additional items that they were bidding.
The higher,
On the RFP?
correct, yes. Now, when you open the bid from Utility Services Company, they replied on the bid proposal form with an amount of $335,000. It appears to be the lower bid. However, that's only a 3-year amount. This was a 10-year amount. They have additional language that says an additional year is $48,000 a year. So once we actually stretch them out to 10 years each, this one came out to just over $700,000, whereas these were at the $500,000 and $600,000 figures. So that's why this is our recommendation.
So that other bid then, they said they were lower, but that wasn't comparing many hours.
Correct. Exactly. You're comparing a 3-year deal to a 10-year.
I got the impression that we do a lot of business with utility services.
They have the contracts on our other towers, and Bob can speak to that a little bit.
Okay. And I'd just be curious if, any of that might be impacted, or if there's other, generally if you use someone over a period of time, there's usually something that goes on with that.
Sure. What I would say is that this is for the newest tower, the southwest tower, and that Utilities has the contract for the maintenance on the other 3 towers.
Right.
That, what I would say is we have a contract that says what they're going to do. So if they don't get this one, they need to meet the contract, or we'll be having a conversation.
Well, right, but I'm looking at it from, I don't know what really entails all this, but say, for example, there's a whole large amount of equipment that they're going to haul up to do these types of things. Where if they're going to do 3, and then you're just going to add an additional one, there could be some cost savings from that aspect.
Okay.
But obviously not noticed in here, but just thoughts that I was thinking about for different things.
Now, is this what cost then, and forgive me for, I read through it, but is that just for one tower?
Correct. This is just the southwest tower, but it's over 10 years, so it's $48,000, $46,000.
And how does that compare to the current cost?
It's more expensive than the other ones, but
It's all-
And there's a reason.
Yeah.
Because the current contract that we have with Utilities was worked out before the suit that went out, that applied. Help me with,
The Supreme Court decided about 6 years ago that maintenance work is subject to prevailing wage.
There you go.
Used to not be. It used to be only new construction. So when the Supreme Court of Missouri did that, it changed the obligation under some contracts, because now folks had to start charging about it prevailing wage when they didn't prior. And they by changing the definition, one of the things they said was subject to it was painting water towers.
Which is
Water
not-
towers was one of them, they specifically identified the case.
that had to be just cheaper than.
That is,
but it did not affect our previous contract on the other 3 towers.
Okay, so that means on the other 3 towers then, we didn't have to, for the duration of the contract, we did not have to pay for the
it depends on how old they are, et cetera, and the application of that. It's not a true force majeure provision, because it's not an act, we're still under those contracts.
So until those contracts are renewed then, we're actually paying, we're not paying for the renovation. Is that what you're saying?
We never pay it, they pay it.
Well,
So the
We're not-
question becomes, are they obligated to pay it? They are. Their costs went up substantially because of it.
so I
The
would
city's
assume,
not at risk at all.
then I would assume that our next go round of bid on the 3 water towers, that they're probably going to substantially higher.
That would be a valid assumption, I think. It's going to get more expensive.
So do we know how long we have on the current contracts that are in place?
It's 1 year, in writing, you can cancel the contract at any time.
In perpetuity then, until we get the contract?
Yes.
or the-
Either party did.
Right.
Either party can cancel.
It's just with utility service, it has to be in writing, and it has to be in contract.
Other discussion? Okay, so obviously we need to bring this back up to the floor of the next meeting.
And as such, we will take the true low bid, prepare the ordinance for the true low bid for the board's consideration.
Which would essentially be the same as what it was.
Yeah, that was the first one.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll move on to, let's do the discussion on the budget right now. Steve, I'll turn that over to you.
Okay, and I'll be turning it over to Dan here in a sec. As you all recall, this is our first attempt at having a priority-based budget. And if, John, if you would you take one and pass it down? Dan, I think you are familiar with this. This is just no, this is what I stole off the internet. So our first year, we are all in uncharted territory, which is exhilarating and nerve-wracking all at the same time. The idea here that we want to focus on priorities instead of line items, and focusing resources on what it is we want to get done rather than trying to not spend as much in particular line items as what is usually the case with the line-by-line budget process. Dan has done most of the work on this budget form. He's had help with each department, with the department heads. What we have presented to you is what they believe that they need to fulfill the priorities that they believe we want to have filled. So now we need to have a conversation. You want to talk about the revenues a little bit here?
So part of our strategy, when we budget, we always project our revenues lower than we think they actually are going to be. We also, when we're looking at our expenses, we also anticipate those being a little bit higher than what we actually foresee them being. So our budget is always, or specifically our revenues, they're going to come in higher than what this says. How much higher? That's the question. We like to be really conservative in those estimates.
So what do you use for a fudge factor?
5 to 8%. No. Okay.
Based on,
Wine coughing.
on the
Do
other
you
side,
disagree with his answer?
Yeah. No subtle hint.
Some of them are a little different. Like, for example, for property taxes, we budget 97% of collection.
Because that one.
Because that's
Pretty
history.
steady.
Yeah, pretty steady. Sales tax and some of the other, we take a little bit larger bite out of. Simply, it makes me feel a little bit more secure. One of the things that I think that we need to talk to the board about is sales tax. Sales tax has been fairly even over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. And we budgeted low, and always exceeds what our expectation is, so that's good. And we've done that in this budget. We do fully anticipate having a new business in town. The builder has already contacted Jack's office. They're ready to move forward and come in, and we have a general knowledge of what we believe the taxable sales are going to be, and that is not represented in this budget. Now, I used your name in vain earlier today. Melissa and I think about this the same way. We don't like to count our chickens before they're hatched.
No.
Okay.
Agree with that?
Okay. But this one, we see the eggs right there. So, how
Do you see a head?
Huh?
Do you see a head yet?
And that's why we're going to have this conversation. How would is the board comfortable with that? And I would not take that estimate for taxable sales and extrapolate, what our 1.5% sales tax would bring because of that estimate, and then put it in. I would apply a conservative amount and then apply another conservative amount to it, were I to include that. Or do we want to take a look at that as it comes in, and then it would require a budget amendment at the time?
My preference would be, let's not count our eggs before they hatch. That's my opinion. Even though we may anticipate that we have some retail or commercial, whatever the case is, once it gets there, we actually start realizing that addition. I would much prefer to do a budget amendment. So,
Now you got it.
Why are we going to do a budget amendment if we have more revenue?
We would. If we wouldn't have spent it. If we
Well,
wouldn't have spent it.
go
If
ahead.
we have more revenue, we don't need to amend the budget to say, look, we made more.
Well, no, but obviously if we're going to find to spend that money,
Right.
then
And
it would be an amendment for expenses.
And I guess the question is, do we want to spend money that we gain extra later without having planned now? Or do we want to do that later?
Well,
That's the question.
I personally think we have a whole lot of things going on right now that are swirling in the air and nothing's final. So to try and count on any of that would be,
16 years ago, I was fairly confident knew exactly what I was going to do the following day.
you know,
It ended up not being anything close to it, so.
Well, and that's gonna have something to do with
And I guess,
the rest of what we were.
what kind of figure are we looking at here as far as the budget is concerned?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
What kind of figure are we looking at?
You talking about specifically for that sales tax
Yes.
number?
Approximately, are we talking about 50,000, 200,000, somewhere in between? Or neither of these?
Top potential that we would want to guess at would be 139,000.
139.
It's a nice problem to have in the future.
It would be great to have that in the future, yes.
All right, so
All right,
I got- we
so
have that.
Steve and Dan, are you okay with that?
well, yeah, but now when we start talking about something else, remember what we just did, okay? Also, one of the other things that I would like to add, and it's not going to greatly affect the revenues, but currently, when there's a water leak, the street department goes out and fixes the leak and then charges Bob. Here's the charge for the water leak, because it's a cost of doing business. What Dan and I have talked about is, instead of that being a case-by-case basis, which is fine, I think this might be something that the auditors might question a little bit, not my proposal, but that, is that we charge a utility franchise for all other utilities for the use of our right-of-ways. We're no different. The water and sewer department are no different. And instead of somewhere between 1.5% to 2%
Sales.
of sales from water. I don't like the idea of sales of sewer, but of those sales, and then it would be transferred to the street department for those expenses, for repair of those bills, and it gives us a standard revenue for that department.
so it's like insurance.
No, it's like a franchise agreement.
It would be, so it
It
would be a
is,
franchise-
but
so it would be a franchise agreement on the utility companies.
it would be like a franchise. We wouldn't have to have the document. But it would just be a policy that we would have, that we would make sure that those expenses are met year in and year out.
From the water fund.
Correct.
And you're looking at about,
And we're doing that now, it's just Bob doesn't know from year to year.
So I guess my question is, why is the street department fixing our water lines? Is it because they have?
well, they're fixing this pavement that has to be
The street,
pulled out and that.
because he has to dig a 6-foot hole sometimes. Yeah.
So it's for that, is that portion, or, I mean, because every time I've seen a leak, I've always seen the water department guys down in the hole. I never see the street
Yeah,
department guys.
well, because they come several days later, after the gravel is settled, et cetera.
What,
So educate me a little further.
So that essentially is gonna end up being an expense out of the water department and their proprietary fund into the general fund as revenue.
Okay, so I guess with the priority-based budget, I understand that. So behind the scenes then, or in more detail, if we have a year where we have a lot of water leaks, then what happens if it exceeds that franchise fee? What happens then?
Then during that budget year, we may have to look at it. The amount that we're going to suggest is going to be ample. And so that the idea would be if we needed to, we could go into one of the reserve accounts to catch up. But if it's all going to heck, we'll know in advance time
or during the course of the year?
yeah, to address it.
So if it's in the general fund, can it be used for anything else?
We would make it a policy if it did go on into streets.
But I mean, streets as in filling holes and patching them after water leaks, or streets as in whatever,
Into the general street budget.
so for anything. Street,
Well, again, the street is spending money out of their budget now.
well, I know, just,
So it's to help cover those expenses.
All right,
But I think where Corey's going, I don't know for sure, Bill, but okay, so that's in the general fund for streets. Let's say they decide they need to resurface Hawthorne. I'm just gonna throw that out there. You've got that money sitting there, and that's what I would say is that needs to be specifically earmarked for repairing the streets that were tore up because of a water leak.
well, I would
Just in the
disagree.
general fund.
Well, I would disagree that I think that what we need to do is that we do have funds that are earmarked. And that what we need to do is make sure that the street department is adequately funded. We're not sitting around looking for ways to spend money on stuff that we don't need. But what we are doing is that we need to have revenues to meet the things that we have. This idea that we earmark this and that money sits there and it doesn't do anything until it's time for that to go for gasoline or whatever, goes against the spirit of the priority-based budget.
I don't think that's what I was getting at. I just think I'm troubled with taking money out of the water fund and putting it into the general street fund and then using it for other purposes.
We're doing that now, except we're just doing it in a way that's not transparent.
So this is one of the things that was brought up by the auditors. What do we need to do to fix it?
So the comment in the audit was that we didn't have any documentation for our transfer. So as long as we just keep the paper trail, document exactly how we come up with the number that we came up with.
So with that, is it better to do it when it happens and keep the paper trail that way, or put it in and keep the paper trail
What's your
that way?
preference?
It probably doesn't matter either way. If it's set up prior, it's easier, because then it becomes just a standard, every month you do this journal entry or whatever. But 6 of one, half another, dozen of the other probably.
What's your preference?
And that's not reflected in the budget.
No, not in the one that you
That
have.
would be something that would change between now and the next meeting.
I would be in favor of doing that simply because then, as we know, we do have the street department expending their funds they currently have to take care of water issues, and we're currently not capturing that as revenue.
I think I see your point, Steve, and what you're trying to propose. I mean, I think most any other issues out on the streets are probably either past water-related issues or sewer-related issues that, come back to bite it. I'm sure, you do a patch and maybe it doesn't take and go back and redo it again.
We try to avoid those for sure.
Well, true, but,
Anyway, we can have the budget that we're going to bring forward at the meeting, reflect that. And then, and we'll make a note so you can see what it is we're trying to get at. Does that work for you guys? And there may be just a few changes to the revenues, and they'll be changed in the hundreds of dollars, and not in the thousands of dollars. So when you get it, there may be some minor changes. Now, let's talk about expenses. This is where it gets fun.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Will the franchise fee be itemized on the bills?
Oh, we're not talking charging
Yeah,
something
we're
to
Oh.
not, we're not
residents.
charging water customers at all.
So no one will, it'll just be internal?
Nothing's gonna
An
change.
internal
okay.
transfer.
Yeah, it's just basically one city bucket to another.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
From
not,
the water fund
we're
to
not
the
losing
general
anything, we're not gaining anything, it's just an even transfer.
Yeah.
Right pocket, left pocket, same pair of pants.
All right, sorry.
So Bob,
Good question.
Bob, you okay with that? Excuse me, sir? You okay with staying 1 to 2% for the franchise fee? Are you okay?
Not a problem, whatever he says.
I paid him earlier today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. And Bob's always easy to get along with. He's a good man. And let me just say this, no kidding. I know I give you a lot of trouble. Bob is one of the diamonds in the rough that we have here. He's a jewel. And that we're lucky to have him. Now, that being said, let's talk about expenditures. As far as revenues to expenditures go, Bob, you're golden. So we won't be talking about you. General, on the other hand, is always the issue, and we have elements of service and standards of service that we want to press in the packet here. Dan has listed the priorities that we do have, and with those priorities that we push forward,
Do you have another?
it should be in.
That's not it, because it's bigger.
I do not have another copy.
Do you have another copy?
So we have, okay, and I'm going to have to depend on Dan for this. We have revenues in the amount of, in the general fund. $3,911,000.
7.
Oh, okay, so, now, we have expenditures in the amount of $4,761,000. One of the things that's allowable, and me and Melissa don't like this, is that we do have reserves that can be accessed for the difference. Or one of the ways to address that was to include the revenue that we believe might be coming this way, but we've chosen not to. So, so we have some services, et cetera, that we need to talk about how we want to address them. And
Not that I'm advocating for it, but what do we have in reserves?
If you're talking reserves is a strange.
And I think,
So if you're talking cash in our bank account, about $7 million. About 2 of that is reserved for water and wastewater impact fees. We have a policy that says we withhold 40% into a reserve fund. That'd be about $4 million. So you're looking at about $1 million strictly in cash on hand that does not have a designated purpose.
And that formula is associated with the 40% of the operating budget is what was recommended. And we do have that. And, you know, obviously, if we have lower than expected revenues or whatever the case might be, the purpose for that budget is just it's a safety blanket for us.
And going into this next budget year, one of the things that Dan and I were going to be bringing forward better policies regarding the various reserve funds, because that terminology sometimes gets to be not our best friend. It creates more confusion than it does clarity. So we will be looking at what we use for reserve and what kind of reserve we will be establishing. Now, what this represents is capital improvements. Probably half of that are what we would term one-time fees. A street sweeper is included in this, trucks, police cars, and different kinds of equipment are included in that amount. Additional personnel benefits, insurance also are represented. And as you know, personnel is not always inexpensive, but in order to meet the requirements that we want to meet for a strong police force, for a adequate building department, etc., this is what the department has brought forward. So,
Approximately 78%, right? 78% of the budget goes to personnel.
that's about right.
I would have to do that math, but that looks probably
779434620006973.
You're talking general fund only?
Yes.
Yeah. That looks good. Yeah, that looks about right.
So I guess, I know police is important, but let's dissect that. Got a 28%, almost 29% increase in police admin.
Chief, do you mind? We're dissecting you.
Yeah, I'm dissecting. The almost 29% increase in police admin, what's that attributed to?
In the current year budget that we're in right now, we have 6 months, sorry to totally steal that show. We had 6 months of a captain's position budgeted. Next year, we're gonna have a full
I
year.
wondered about that on that one. Okay, let's go down to patrol and crime, 30% increase.
That is a new officer, or a second SRO. The chief can chime in with more details on any of this thing else, and also 2 new vehicles.
Is the new SRO due to the new elementary school or?
Yeah, patrol.
What that includes, two new officers. One of those will become the new SRO in the 18-19 school year. What we don't want to do is we don't want to wait till the school year starts to try to figure out where we're going to come with the SRO.
Okay.
We have to hire the person's taking their place, get the SRO trained, so they basically have this school year to get them.
Within the spirit of priority-based budgeting and not line item budgeting.
Right.
And what we have are outcomes. And Chief, you have some figures here, and I think Corey had asked for them. But this is the sort of thing that.
This is the kind of thing that drives our costs. We look at this, we went back, we tried to look at about the last 5 years, it's about 5.5. There's one graph, I think it's the second one there, yeah. So we went ahead and projected out the based on the first 6 months numbers. I can't let you know what in August. If the rest of this year goes like August, forget this. We had the absolute busiest busiest month, the month of August, this department's ever seen. Calls were up by over 100 additional calls for the month. August went crazy. We were all sat around, well, sure seems busy. And the numbers come in, yeah, it seems busy, but it's busy. So we're gonna keep an eye on that and see where September, October, November,
Where do we think our population's going to be at the end of this year?
At the end of this year,
Mark doesn't have those figures yet. Those other numbers up through 16 come from Mark.
Yeah, it's about,
Coming from Mark, I believe where they have to project it roughly for 2020, we're in the 13-ish range, and some change. Again, I'm going from them. I asked Jack about that, and they haven't given a figure for 2017.
Because I like this graph where, you know, it shows the slope of the population increase and the slope of the, yeah. I think this is very helpful.
And as you
Yeah.
can see, population goes up.
Yep.
School population goes up, which is something we haven't talked about, but, you know, we've got a student population of 2,500 people in a small city or a small town. And then you throw in, staff and teachers and all that, you're closer to 3,000 people that right now, you've got one person assigned. Ideally, we like, we want to build, I understand the school hesitation, that's a big jump for them, so we'll work on that.
Because the school pays for a portion of that
Yeah,
SRO.
they pay for what they use, so, talk about the one configuring, when the new school's open, decided to kind of step into this thing carefully and let them come along as well, so, the plan is to have additional SRO in 18, 19 school year with the elementary opens, and then, imagine in a couple of years, we'll probably talk about second, first, third, and fourth, and then, again, it's populations and student enrollment continues as well. I don't think anybody has any reason to think this stuff's going to be made.
I just noticed that, you know, the calls really haven't increased at the same pace as our population growth,
It's
so.
pretty close. I get that asked a lot at different meetings and stuff like that, you know. Why are we going up? Getting bigger. We're going from small town to small city. More people want to get here. More things are going to happen.
But that's where we're trying to go, so that we can have a benchmark that goes along with what we're trying to accomplish, so that we can report if we're accomplishing it. Then we in future budgets, we determine where those resources go. And you have this amount of money desired to go out, and you have to hit your savings account to make up the difference. It's just using that terminology for me. It's quite a wake-up call. One of the things that this year that we have a problem with is that because we can only address property tax every 2 years, this is the year that we can't address it for additional funding. We've talked about various potential other sales taxes, which we can look at, again, taking effect after their passage, etc. So I would suggest, in order to keep moving forward, because part of the reason that we're in the position that we're in is we've had a long sustainable growth, which wasn't addressed properly in the past, and I believe that we're beginning another era of long sustained growth. I don't want to be guilty of the same thing. Last time, just to add insult to injury, that we did away with the property tax, and I know it's there's a lot of folks that would want to talk about that. We can get to that position where we can address some of our revenue issues, and we are aggressively pursuing retail. That's the key. That's where we're going to have our growth, and we're pursuing that. And as we open up the south end, we'll start to realize some of this. So here's what I would suggest. Is there an amount that you're comfortable with, or an amount that you would want to bring the expenditures down to, that Dan and I can take a look at and work with the department heads to bring it to an acceptable level? Still trying to maintain the biggest bang for our buck in our property.
Well, what I want to see is, I still want to see, that we're making those capital investments to make sure that we are doing what's necessary to bring in the growth. So I think that we need to make sure we're keeping that stuff.
We will, that's outside of the operational budget, and we would continue to do that. You guys are in total control of that.
I mean, the basic answer is we should get it down to where our expenses meet our revenues. But I mean, obviously, we have a lot of these numbers already in here, so it's hard to say, you know.
One of the challenges we have too is the fact that if you look at our population growth, and for the last 2 years, we've been issuing a lot of home building permits, and as our population grows, and that does affect our school population, you would think that there should be an equal increase in our commercial and retail development. And so when our population for our residential, which barely, the taxes from that barely takes care of supporting them. If we can expand our retail and our commercial development, a greater portion of that will help drive revenue so that we don't have a shortfall like that.
Here's the difference between what we're doing now. Again, priority based, and we've cast our vision. We're moving down that road towards what it is that we want. What we have done is the lowest level of budgeting, the line by line budget, which invites you to don't get crazy. What you spend last year, that's what we'll give you a little bit for inflation this year. And doing that year after year after year keeps your revenues down, keeps your expenditures down. This is part of the reason why we need to move forward with the priority-based budget, because no one wants to hear it, no one wants to believe it. But part of the reason streets aren't any better, part of the reason parks aren't any better, is because we've had a $300,000 budget in parks for the 7 years that I've been here. And that's, whether we needed it or not, we certainly have wanted more things in the park with that. So I believe that this board has done the right thing. Let's move on with the priority, and we're trying to get there, and nobody's on the behind the 8 ball more than staff is, or this guy. And but it is a time that we have to decide: are we going to be in the town business, or are we just going to be in the mediocre town business?
So understand that and appreciate that we are adopting priority based. And just we have several new hires proposed in here. You know, can we stagger those hires to when they're needed? Knowing that, you know, SRO is a great example. You got to have them on board, get them trained, get them ready to go. Got that, but you know.
And yes,
that would be my advice, is to go back and see what can you do. You know, sharpen the pencil a little bit and let's see what we can come up with.
Is it acceptable to have at least for this year a little help from our savings account? And that tells me how big a knife we're slashing this thing with.
Can I?
And you've got that there, you can see, like, there's just a steady growth here. Population's growing, crime's growing, more people, we're growing. Then if you look at page 3 at the bottom there, you see I tried to lay it out in calendar view as best I can. We looked at personnel, we looked at staffing levels, and those months that are highlighted red-ish under them, those are the months that we were fully staffed in the last 3.5 years. Out of 42 months, we were fully staffed for 6 months. 14% of the time we were fully staffed. So we're battling that too, trying to maintain services, trying to answer calls, trying to provide even better service than we did last year. and we're back to this as well. I tend to have an answer for this because everybody I talk to in the industry, this is an industry-wide thing. This is not unique to Smithville, it's not unique to Kansas City area, not unique to Missouri. It's industry-wide. As the economy comes back, jobs siphon out of the government sector, back into the private sector. Back in '08, went the other way. We enjoyed having our pick of people. We picked up a lot of good people. The tides turned the other way, and we're battling that as well. Steve and I have discussed this at length, different approaches and concepts of overhiring and stuff like that, and how to utilize some of those approaches to try to deliver the best service we can.
So I guess to tag on what Jeff is kind of asking there, like the second SRO, could that be put off till we're halfway through this budget year?
One of those two, we probably could look at that, and I'll get Dan to help me crunch some numbers and all of that.
And just see, you know, from that standpoint, and if the other retail businesses do materialize, that kind of puts us in a different situation.
And I'll
for
probably,
the rest of the
probably
year.
talking 25,000 there. And Dan and I can discuss that maybe.
But, and again, that's one of those things that is a result of the line-by-line budget.
Sure.
And so those are the things that we would have to try to make sure that we don't continue, but we do. Now, Melissa, you had a question.
Well, I want to kind of get some calculating here. I'll be truthful, I am not in favor of going into this.
Which we do.
If we're already meeting that emergency fund, that money shouldn't just sit in there, forever. I mean, I don't think that it's doing the people's good by having money sit into an account
Well,
when we could be
certain
using
has to
it.
stay aside.
Yeah, and we've already met that,
Right.
and we've met that 40% number. So we're talking, we have extra money in there that we don't need to keep in there. And we
But
shouldn't.
only about $1 million, and our shortfall's about $1 million, and you do that for more than 1 year, and
That's just it.
Yeah, it's not sustainable.
And that's,
Correct.
obviously, we wouldn't be able to go into those reserves year after year.
Yeah, I
But-
agree.
And we haven't in the past.
But Melissa has given us a number that we can, okay, yeah, I see that, and a directive that I think we can come back and have that represented in the, you think we can have that easily, week, right?
Partially, we need to understand that if we do that with our staffs, then we're basically saying to Steve and to
But the revenues and expenses are. So I think that this is a much more transparent document for the people sitting at this table. And that, so that we can understand, one of the things that Alan has in his department is an additional truck for snow removal. Okay? So we'd be down to the same number. And then when people start calling and no one's ever got to my, it's been 3 hours and no one's got here. It takes a while, when you have fewer. So
where I think the difference is we help set the overall priorities, and then you all go figure out how to execute off of what we have.
I agree.
And then comes the important part.
Both for the elected officials and for staff, we're, like a kid that's with a yo-yo, never, not sure how to get this thing down, but we're trying. So anyway, if everyone's comfortable with the suggestion that Melissa made, we can use that as guidance and then bring something back for the meeting on Tuesday.
And I think you feel would be acceptable and unacceptable relative to the impact.
I think we can do that.
Okay?
Can I ask one more question? I know it's going to come through your lead. As far as the revenues coming in, I know the bulk of your property taxes are going to come in probably even in December and January. Is that
Correct.
correct? sales tax, does that come in back to us from the state on a monthly basis?
It comes in from the state on a monthly basis, and when I first got here, you could look at it, and it, you know, down in the spring, late spring, it ticked up, fall it went down, you know, it kind of did this general roller coaster.
But it also
It doesn't
does,
do that now.
it comes month to month, but it also comes, it's either 2 or 3 months behind.
Behind.
Yes.
So one thing I wanted to mention, and was on Clay County Senior Services, we were talking about the same thing. You know, most of their revenue comes in from the property taxes, and that's it for the entire year. So if you had a catastrophe or something and those automatic deposits didn't make it, where could the city go? That's where you would look back to the savings account that we have. They don't make
The
those.
emergency reserve.
Right.
Yeah.
Contingent fund of 40%.
And that's why 40%
But
is
that's-
good, but we got way more than that 40%.
Again,
So we shouldn't keep it in there if it's
Then we
already
got,
meeting.
then we got the water set aside we gotta have, and it basically comes down to what?
But you
$1
did
million?
ask the question, basically, the question on the table is whether or not we're willing to go into the savings, basically.
Basically.
And my opinion is if there was a risk to be assigned to doing it, this would be the least risky time, you know, with the way that, that we're starting to build and develop around here from that aspect. Plus, we're also asking a lot here recently as a new board, and we got new people coming in, so there's going to be expenses. The only challenge we have, at least I have, is what do we lose?
I'm sorry.
What do we lose? Even at this 10%, I recommend what do we lose? So, you know, if we're losing, you know,
And yeah, we'll
and that'll be
the story. We
that'll
tell.
be your
Other savings we've been able to have in the past years. So we're, it's there, and it doesn't touch our contingency funds. And if the board decides that, hey, this is important this year because of the number of projects we have going on, whatever they might be, we may want to do that. But again, I think it's important for Steve and Dan to go back and do this exercise and then let us, the board, know what those priorities are, what that means in priorities that we will not, that we're proposing to eliminate.
It helps us get very familiar with the process.
Very good. Any
It
other-
keeps us out of line item.
Yes.
Any other discussion on the budget, Steve?
No, I think we've got our marching orders.
Thank you both, I think you did a great job of getting this
All right,
prepared.
very good. Now, if you need to go now, Jeff.
No, we've got folks who have important issues here that
All right.
9-year-old boys can wait a little bit.
Well, and the next person that's here with the subject before us is Mr. Foley. Okay. I don't know. I'm having these moments, senior moments. And Mr. Foley is here about the Harborview Townhome HOA water bill that came before you guys. We're looking at staff. You know, how we want to proceed. I think that we had talked about, there was some discussion about actual cost of production, and that actual cost was, I appreciate. The charge for water, such as we had, is that what the board wants to pursue, just as part of staff. You know, it's one of those things that it's a break from our current policy. You know, what we do with a person in a home, that we do give them some, if the water break is outside of the home, we do give them a break on their sewer, because we're not having to address that. This being a sprinkler system, there's no sewer, and, you know, no home attached to it. This is, it exists to make sure that the grass stays green. So, you know, I think that's something that we probably need to maybe take a look at how we can help those folks with sprinkler systems, prevent this from happening as well. And no ideas there. But for Mr. Foley, for the moment, how do you want us to prepare that?
Well, I mean, originally, I thought during the meeting, we agreed, it was proposed that we do just what you just said.
Okay.
But then I believe some folks wanted to wait and then come up with a policy first.
We can
I
do
mean-
that, and I would try to channel my.
I'll be honest, I don't care either way. I mean, I'd rather get it taken care of right now with this situation. But I mean, if we're gonna make a policy, let's just make it, and then it takes care
I
of
just
it
think
at
the
same
policy
time.
will take more time. That's all.
And obviously, that's my concern. Right now, we're not charging interest or anything to the homeowners association. My concern is that if we just simply say we're in charge, whatever we decide to charge, cost of water only, et cetera, Mr. Foley, we're going to have people who've been charged in the past and say, hey, we want the same treatment. It happened with the building permit fees for the Catholic Church several years ago, because we did at the time have a policy where the board could reduce the amount of fees for permits for schools and semi-government
Nonprofit
nonprofits,
organizations.
et cetera. And they come back after the fact 2 years later and say, well, wait a minute, we didn't get this. And so how far back do we take it if somebody says, well, hey, you didn't make, that's not equitable for me. Whereas if we adopt a policy that says from this day forward, we're going to do that, and then include Mr. Foley on that new policy, then we're not liable for anybody else coming back. And that's why, personally, I think it makes me grant or do anything for the HOA. And again,
And we can try to put one together for consideration.
is that agreeable? I mean, what does the board think?
Well, I mean, that's fine, but when it comes to policy, it sounds like you found an old one? I mean,
I'm sorry, what?
is this an old one? Or is this the one that we?
Actually, in 2015, when we changed the water policy, we left out that policy about the sewer, the sewer charge. Did not intend to leave it out, because you see there's an A, and then we did follow up with B. We need to reinsert that, because that's the practice that we're using now.
That would then be indicative
Of what we're talking
if
about.
that's what we're talking about.
So then,
No, I don't believe that it is. I mean, because if we follow the ordinance, that we wouldn't give a break to anybody for anything. And that was not our intent. So and that's not the practice that we
Two
have.
parts here. This here is for
We needed Melissa 2 years ago.
reducing the sewer, this amount we would charge
Right.
for sewer.
Here.
But then what we're talking about here is an additional policy that would say, in the event that the board deems that there is a leak or something, we then apply the cost rather than the retail, whatever. Does that make sense?
okay.
Which I think we should do that. Can we get a policy that has that where we, and I like the idea we're in here, it has like, some of them have, some towns have a 1 year, or a time you get one,
Or 18
one
months,
per
yeah.
year. I like that idea, and I think we should implement that into the policy.
Okay.
And I also think that we should make sure that the city, is able to prove that it was an actual, water issue, a pipe leak or something like that, versus someone just filling up a swimming pool. So I'm wondering if there's a way we can have a verification step.
I
Well,
think
that's-
it's probably
How
not
many
many, but
swimming pools do we have in Smithville? Other than,
More than you know, but
there's some other language somewhere in that policy
It
that
talks
says
about
they
that.
have to give us proof that
Right.
the fix has been.
There's actually, I think in one of the,
and I believe that the proof should be on them, not
Right.
for us.
Then you can just come up with a repair bill. I mean, I want to make sure we're documenting and we're verifying. The city can verify that this happened, and not someone just submit a phony bill.
We can verify what goes through the water meter. What standard happens is you have a water leak, and the first thing is that water meter is not running correctly. We have a policy by which they can have that checked or whatever. At some point, we have to know that that our meters read correctly, and we have to believe that we're not always the one that's
And that's okay, but I don't think we should forgive.
And the one thing that I would say, and I feel that this is the position that I have to bring up, is we're talking about revenue. And, you know, there's certain things, there are some expenses. I don't get a vote, I don't get to say, I get to say, but you guys make the call.
But I don't think it's fair that, you know, we count on revenue of a citizen's misfortune, though. I mean, that's where I'm at on that.
We do for traffic tickets.
Well, they can prevent that.
I'm gonna pay for that one. So, but, and that's why it's a policy.
Traffic tickets. Between traffic tickets and water lines, Steve.
Now you're gonna start that rumor again.
Yeah.
Tickets are for your safety, not
I
for
think
revenue.
Of the people at this table, I'm the one that's had a traffic ticket the most recently, so.
Should we take a poll?
Oh, but here in town, I should say. So, okay, I think we got what we need for that. Mr. Foley, sorry, we're getting to you. We're getting to you.
Well, we are making progress, though. We're on the local government, turn very slowly, but for a reason, so that's good. So that's okay.
Well, I was hoping Labor Day, but maybe it might be Christmas.
So,
He didn't say
Next
which
year.
Labor Day.
as far as other issues, we have the time capsule and the senior discussion.
I have some other information. I think that might actually not be that big an issue, but I need to get.
For the time capsule?
Yeah.
You mean what, 10 foot by 10 foot by 10 foot?
Going back and reading her information, I think that it might actually be in inches that I read it. Oh, okay, I see. And so,
Plus, I'm not in favor of burying a time capsule below the floodplain. Just,
well, and if it's this, I think that it's something that we can probably work out. If, as small as this thing, it's actually smaller than the one that they had originally discussed, and that's part of what threw me off.
all right, very good.
So I think we can handle that one.
Very good. Any other of these that the board members feel like we really need to discuss tonight? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Alderman Wilson. All in favor, please say aye.
All right.
And opposed, please say no. We stand adjourned. Thank you.
Play ball.
This is the first time I've seen Dan really good and sick. So.
Go have fun at the ball game, guys. Are you helping to officiate?
I'm one of the coaches, so. But,